Beneath calm waves, familiar coastlines often mask forces capable of shattering routine outings in an instant. Divers, boaters, and thrill-seekers alike can find themselves in sudden chaos when the ocean's most powerful hunters strike without warning. From a diving crew attacked off Gansby in under 5 minutes to a parasailing adventure torn apart above South African waters, these events reveal how swiftly safety can vanish. In this video, we'll uncover 6 chilling encounters where ordinary days at sea turned into unforgettable battles for survival. The waters off Gansby, South Africa, had earned their reputation as one of the most treacherous diving locations on the planet by November 2016. This coastal town, situated roughly 160 kilometers southeast of Cape Town, sat directly in the path of the great white shark migration route. The area's unique underwater topography, featuring deep kelp forests and rocky outcroppings, created the perfect hunting ground for these apex predators. Local fishermen had long whispered tales of massive shadows gliding beneath their boats, but the scientific community remained fascinated by the opportunity to study these creatures in their natural habitat. Marco Jensen, a 31-year-old underwater cinematographer from Denmark, had spent 3 years planning this documentary expedition. His reputation for capturing dangerous marine life had earned him contracts with several international wildlife networks, but the great whites of Gansby represented his most ambitious project yet. Jensen assembled a team of 5 other experienced divers, each specializing in different aspects of underwater filming. The crew included Hendrik Volker, a German marine photographer known for his close encounter shots; Priya Nandakumar, an Indian-British diving instructor with over 2,000 logged hours; Samuel Cartwright, a British equipment specialist; Isabella Romano, an Italian marine biologist; and Dmitry Petrov, a Russian safety diver whose job involved monitoring the team's air supply and emergency protocols. The morning of November 12th brought unusually calm conditions to the Atlantic waters surrounding Gansby. The team departed from the small harbor aboard a chartered vessel at 6:30 a.m., their equipment carefully secured in waterproof containers. Jensen had insisted on using minimal protective gear, arguing that traditional shark cages would interfere with their goal of capturing natural behavior. Instead, the team relied on a small inflatable platform that could be quickly deployed and retrieved, along with handheld cameras and standard diving suits. By 7 a.m., the boat had reached the predetermined filming location, approximately 8 kilometers offshore, where the continental shelf dropped dramatically into darker waters. The crew conducted their standard safety briefing while Jensen reviewed the dive plan one final time. Their objective was simple: descend to a depth of 20 meters, establish position near a known kelp forest, and film any great white activity for up to 45 minutes before returning to the surface. The water temperature registered at 16 degrees Celsius, typical for the South African spring season. Visibility appeared excellent, extending nearly 30 meters in all directions. Jensen felt confident as his team entered the water at 7:25 a.m., their inflatable platform providing a stable base for equipment and emergency supplies. The initial descent proceeded smoothly, with all 6 divers reaching their target depth without incident. Petrov positioned himself slightly above the others, maintaining constant visual contact while monitoring everyone's air consumption through hand signals. The kelp forest stretched endlessly in all directions, its brown fronds swaying gently in the current like an underwater cathedral. Jensen began filming immediately, capturing sweeping shots of the marine ecosystem while his team spread out in a predetermined formation. For the first 30 minutes, the dive progressed exactly as planned. Romano documented various fish species darting between the kelp stalks, while Cartwright adjusted camera angles to maximize lighting conditions. Volker had wandered approximately 20 meters from the main group, pursuing a school of yellowtail that seemed unusually agitated. Jensen later recalled thinking that the fish behavior appeared strange, as if something had disturbed their normal patterns. At 7:58 a.m., Jensen noticed movement in his peripheral vision. What appeared to be a massive shadow was gliding beneath the kelp canopy, moving with the fluid grace that could only belong to a large predator. He signaled frantically to his team, pointing downward while adjusting his camera settings for low-light conditions. The shadow seemed to pause, as if aware it had been detected, before continuing its slow circle around the diving party. Suddenly, the water erupted around them, An enormous great white shark, later estimated at 16 feet in length, burst upward through the kelp forest with explosive force. The impact sent Jensen tumbling backward as the predator's massive head struck their inflatable platform, puncturing it instantly and scattering equipment in all directions. The shark's black eyes, cold and calculating, seemed to assess each diver individually before selecting its target. Volker, separated from the main group, became the shark's primary focus. The predator moved with terrifying speed, covering the 20-meter distance in seconds. Its jaws, lined with razor-sharp teeth, clamped down on Volker's left leg just above the knee. The force of the bite was so powerful that it severed his diving fin completely, sending a cloud of blood into the water that only seemed to intensify the shark's aggressive behavior. Panic erupted among the remaining team members. Romano attempted to swim toward Volker, but the shark's thrashing movements created a chaos of bubbles and debris that made navigation nearly impossible. Cartwright lost his grip on his camera equipment as he tried to ascend rapidly, violating basic decompression protocols in his desperation to reach the surface. Jensen continued filming, his professional instincts overriding his terror as he documented the unfolding catastrophe. The great white released Volker momentarily, only to circle back with renewed aggression. This time, it targeted Nandakumar, who had been attempting to retrieve emergency signal devices from the destroyed platform. The shark's second attack proved even more devastating, its powerful jaws crushing her diving gear and inflicting massive trauma. Her screams, muffled by her breathing apparatus, created an eerie soundtrack to the underwater nightmare. Petrov, trained in emergency rescue procedures, made a desperate attempt to distract the predator by striking his diving knife against his air tank, creating metallic sounds that echoed through the water. The noise seemed to confuse the shark momentarily, providing a brief window for the surviving team members to begin their emergency ascent. However, the great white quickly refocused its attention, launching a third attack that caught Romano as she struggled with her buoyancy control device. Within 5 minutes of the initial encounter, 3 team members had sustained fatal injuries. Jensen, Cartwright, and Petrov barely reached the surface, clinging desperately to fragments of their destroyed equipment while treading water in the bloodied ocean. The support boat crew, who had been monitoring the dive from above, immediately initiated emergency rescue procedures. Jensen's waterproof camera had continued recording throughout the entire incident, capturing footage that would later be analyzed by marine biologists and safety experts worldwide. The horrifying sequence showed the massive shark's calculated approach, the explosive violence of its attacks, and the complete helplessness of even experienced divers when confronted by such raw predatory power. Local authorities responded within 30 minutes, but recovery efforts for the 3 victims proved challenging due to continued shark activity in the area. Maritime rescue services eventually retrieved the bodies, though the psychological impact on the survivors would last far longer than their physical injuries. The incident prompted immediate investigations into great white behavior patterns around Gansbai. Marine biologists confirmed that November 2016 had seen unusually aggressive shark activity throughout the region, possibly related to changes in prey distribution or territorial disputes among competing predators. The documentary footage, despite its tragic circumstances, provided valuable scientific data about great white hunting strategies and attack patterns. Jensen never returned to underwater filming, instead dedicating his career to shark safety education and promoting protective equipment standards for marine documentary crews. The waters off the Washington coast had experienced an unusually active summer in August 2025, with marine biologists reporting increased orcapod movements following the largest salmon run in nearly a decade. The Pacific Northwest's complex underwater geography, featuring deep channels and rocky outcroppings near the San Juan Islands, created ideal hunting conditions for these intelligent marine mammals. Local Coast Guard stations had issued routine advisories about increased whale activity, but nothing had prepared them for what would unfold during a seemingly standard rescue operation. Station Seattle received the distress call at 2:17 p.m. on August 9th. A kayaker had become stranded approximately 6 nautical miles northwest of Whidbey Island after his vessel suffered structural damage in choppy waters. The rescue fell under routine protocol, requiring deployment of a standard 25-foot patrol boat with a 3-person crew. Petty Officer Marcus Thompson, a 15-year Coast Guard veteran, commanded the vessel alongside seaman Rebecca Chen. the boat's navigator and communications specialist, and Petty Officer James Rodriguez, who served as the rescue swimmer and medical technician. Thompson had responded to hundreds of similar calls throughout his career, ranging from disabled pleasure craft to more serious maritime emergencies. The afternoon conditions appeared favorable for rescue operations, with moderate swells and clear visibility extending beyond 10 miles. Weather reports indicated stable conditions for the remainder of the day, though scattered clouds suggested possible afternoon thunderstorms developing further inland. The patrol boat departed Station Seattle at 2:35 p.m., maintaining cruising speed through relatively calm waters. Chen established radio contact with the stranded kayaker, confirming his location and medical status while Rodriguez prepared rescue equipment, including flotation devices, emergency blankets, and basic medical supplies. The crew estimated arrival time at approximately 3 p.m., well within acceptable response parameters for this type of incident. As they approached the coordinates provided by the kayaker, Thompson spotted the disabled vessel floating roughly 200 meters ahead. The kayaker appeared conscious and responsive, waving frantically toward the approaching Coast Guard boat. Rodriguez prepared to enter the water if necessary, though the proximity of the disabled kayak suggested they could execute the rescue using standard retrieval procedures. At 2:58 p.m., Chen noticed an unusual water disturbance, approximately 50 meters off their starboard side. What initially appeared to be debris or floating kelp soon revealed itself as something far more substantial. A massive black and white form broke the surface briefly before disappearing beneath the waves, leaving only expanding circles of disturbed water to mark its presence. Thompson immediately reduced engine speed and activated the boat's sonar equipment, hoping to track whatever marine life had appeared near their rescue operation. The readings indicated a large object moving slowly beneath their vessel, circling at a depth of approximately 15 feet. Based on the sonar signature and the brief surface observation, the crew suspected they were dealing with a mature orca, though its behavior seemed unusually focused on their boat. Suddenly, the patrol boat lurched violently to port as something struck the hull with tremendous force. Rodriguez, who had been leaning over the side rail preparing rescue equipment, lost his footing completely and crashed against the opposite gunwale. The impact sent him sprawling across the deck, his right arm striking a metal cleat with enough force to fracture the bone just above his wrist. The orca surfaced directly alongside the boat, its massive dorsal fin towering nearly 6 feet above the water's surface. Thompson estimated the animal's length at approximately 20 feet, marking it as a fully mature male. Rather than swimming away after the initial contact, the whale began circling the patrol boat with obvious curiosity, occasionally bumping the hull with its massive head. Each contact sent vibrations through the vessel's frame, creating an unsettling rhythm that made normal operations nearly impossible. Chen attempted to maintain radio communication with both the stranded kayaker and their home station, but the constant motion made it difficult to operate the equipment safely. Rodriguez, despite his injured arm, tried to secure loose gear that was sliding around the deck with each impact. The orca's behavior escalated when it began using its powerful tail fluke to splash water over the boat's deck. Gallons of seawater crashed over the crew, soaking equipment and making the already treacherous footing even more dangerous. Thompson realized that standard evasive maneuvers might actually increase the whale's interest, as sudden movements could trigger more aggressive investigative behavior. For nearly 8 minutes, the massive marine mammal continued its inspection of the Coast Guard vessel, occasionally diving beneath the boat before surfacing on the opposite side. During one particularly close approach, the orca's eye appeared to make direct contact with Thompson, who later described the encounter as unsettling yet oddly intelligent. The whale's interest finally began to wane when a pod of smaller orcas appeared roughly half a mile to the northwest. The massive male ceased his circling behavior, vocalized several times with distinctive calls that carried across the water, and began swimming toward his companions. Within minutes, the immediate threat had passed, leaving the Coast Guard crew to assess their situation and continue with the original rescue mission. Post-incident inspection revealed minor hull damage along the port side, primarily consisting of superficial scratches and small dents where the orca's head had made contact. Rodriguez required immediate medical attention for his fractured arm, though he insisted on completing the kayaker rescue before seeking treatment. Marine mammal experts later confirmed that August 2025 had produced unprecedented orca activity throughout the Puget Sound region, with several pods following salmon migrations closer to shore than typical seasonal patterns would suggest. They emphasized that the whales' behavior, while frightening for the crew, represented natural curiosity rather than genuine aggression, though they acknowledged that such encounters posed real dangers for small vessels operating in areas with active whale populations. The coastal waters surrounding Gansbaai, South Africa, had established themselves as the premier destination for cage diving with great white sharks by July 2017. This fishing village, positioned along the country's southern coastline approximately 170 kilometers from Cape Town, benefited from unique oceanic conditions that attracted massive populations of these apex predators. The convergence of warm Indian Ocean currents with cold Atlantic waters created an ecosystem rich in seals, the primary food source for great whites, making encounters virtually guaranteed for commercial diving operations. Richard Harrison, a 42-year-old mechanical engineer from Birmingham, England, had spent 2 years planning this family vacation to coincide with his teenage children's summer break. His wife, Margaret, aged 39, worked as a secondary school mathematics teacher and shared his enthusiasm for marine wildlife. Their children, 16-year-old Daniel and 14-year-old Emma, had initially shown reluctance about the cage diving experience, but gradually warmed to the adventure after months of their father's persistent enthusiasm. The Harrison family had booked their expedition through a well-established local operator that maintained an exemplary safety record, spanning nearly 15 years of commercial cage diving operations. The company's standard equipment consisted of reinforced steel cages measuring 8 by 6 by 8 feet, built from heavy-gauge metal bars spaced 4 inches apart to prevent sharks from entering while still providing excellent visibility for photographers and observers. July 15th brought ideal conditions for shark cage diving, with calm seas, excellent visibility extending beyond 20 meters, and water temperatures hovering around 15 degrees Celsius. The tour boat departed from Gansbaai Harbor at 7 a.m., carrying 12 passengers, including the Harrison family, along with a crew of 6 experienced guides and safety personnel. Captain Willem Snyman, a veteran of over 3,000 cage diving expeditions, commanded the vessel while his team prepared chumming equipment designed to attract great whites to the diving area. The boat reached the designated diving location at 8:30 a.m., positioning itself over a shallow reef approximately 12 kilometers from shore. This particular site had earned recognition for consistent great white activity, with depth ranges between 15 and 25 meters, providing ideal conditions for both shark observation and diver safety. The crew immediately began deploying chum lines, releasing carefully measured amounts of fish blood and oil to create scent trails that would draw predators from considerable distances. Within 30 minutes, the first great white appeared on sonar readings, circling the vessel at a depth of approximately 20 meters. Crew members confirmed the shark's presence through surface observations, estimating its length at roughly 14 feet based on dorsal fin characteristics and body proportions. Additional sharks arrived over the next hour, creating the perfect conditions for cage diving operations to begin. Richard Harrison volunteered his family for the second group of divers, explaining to his children that the anticipation would make their experience more memorable. They donned the provided wetsuits, masks, and breathing apparatus while crew members conducted mandatory safety briefings covering hand signals, emergency procedures, and proper behavior inside the protective cage. At 10:45 a.m., the Harrison family entered the reinforced cage, which had been lowered to a depth of 8 meters using the boat's hydraulic winch system. The cage's design allowed for multiple viewing angles while maintaining structural integrity against potential shark contact. Richard positioned himself near the front opening, eager to capture photographs of any approaching predators, while Margaret and their children distributed themselves along the sides for optimal viewing positions. The underwater visibility proved exceptional, allowing the family to observe the ocean environment in remarkable detail. Schools of yellowtail moved through the water column, while occasional seals appeared in the distance, their presence indicating the likelihood of shark encounters. Daniel later reported that the initial 15 minutes underwater felt like swimming inside an aquarium, with marine life appearing completely natural and unafraid of their presence. At 11:02 a.m., a massive great white shark emerged from the depths, approaching the cage with obvious interest in the occupants. Richard estimated the predator's length at 18 feet, making it one of the largest specimens he had observed during their South African vacation. The shark circled slowly, maintaining a distance of approximately 3 meters while studying the unusual underwater structure. Richard became increasingly excited by the photography opportunities, leaning closer to the cage's front opening to capture detailed images of the approaching predator. Margaret later recalled warning her husband about positioning himself too close to the bars, but acknowledged that his enthusiasm had overcome his usual caution. Daniel and Emma pressed against the opposite side of the cage, fascinated by their first close encounter with such a magnificent predator. Without warning, the great white accelerated directly toward the cage, striking the reinforced structure with tremendous force. The impact bent several of the front bars inward, creating gaps larger than the original 4-inch spacing. Richard's right arm, which had been extended outside the cage while adjusting his camera settings, became trapped between the twisted metal bars as the shark's momentum carried it past the opening. The predator's powerful jaws clamped down on Richard's exposed limb with crushing force, its razor-sharp teeth penetrating flesh and bone instantaneously. Margaret and the children watched in horror as he struggled against the shark's grip, his muffled screams creating streams of bubbles that rose toward the surface. The great white began thrashing violently, using its massive body weight to pull against the trapped arm, while simultaneously attempting to withdraw from the damaged cage. Emma later described the attack as lasting several minutes, though marine biologists suggested the entire incident probably occurred within 30 to 60 seconds. Daniel attempted to grab his father's free arm, hoping to provide leverage against the shark's pulling force, while Margaret pounded frantically against the cage bars in a desperate attempt to distract the predator. The boat crew above immediately recognized the emergency situation when debris from the damaged cage began floating to the surface, followed by unmistakable traces of blood in the water. Captain Snyman initiated emergency ascent procedures while his dive team prepared for immediate water entry to assist the trapped family. By the time rescue divers reached the cage, the great white had released its grip and disappeared into deeper waters, but Richard had sustained catastrophic injuries that proved fatal, despite immediate medical intervention. The remaining family members were brought to the surface in severe psychological shock, requiring extensive trauma counseling and medical support. Subsequent investigations revealed that the cage's structural failure resulted from an unprecedented combination of the shark's size, speed, and angle of approach, creating forces that exceeded the equipment's design specifications. Maritime authorities implemented immediate safety modifications for all cage diving operations, including enhanced bar spacing regulations and mandatory structural reinforcement requirements. Margaret Harrison later established a foundation dedicated to improving cage diving safety standards, ensuring that her husband's death would contribute to preventing similar tragedies in the future. The pristine waters surrounding the Great Barrier Reef had attracted adventure sports enthusiasts from around the world by June 2025, with stand-up paddleboarding emerging as one of the most popular activities for tourists seeking close encounters with marine wildlife. The coral reef system, stretching over 2,300 kilometers along Australia's northeastern coast, provided ideal conditions for water sports with its crystal-clear visibility, moderate currents, and diverse ecosystem. However, these same characteristics that made the area attractive to recreational users also created perfect hunting grounds for various shark species, including the formidable tiger shark. Sophie Lang, a 32-year-old physiotherapist from Melbourne, had been practicing stand-up paddleboarding for 3 years before booking her dream vacation to explore the Great Barrier Reef. Her athletic background in competitive swimming provided the foundation for rapid progression in the sport, and she had completed several challenging paddleboard expeditions along Victoria's coastline. The reef's reputation for exceptional visibility and abundant marine life made it an irresistible destination for someone seeking to combine fitness activities with underwater photography. Sophie had enrolled in a week-long paddleboard touring program operated by an established adventure sports company based in Cairns. The program included daily guided expeditions to different reef locations, each selected for its unique characteristics and marine life populations. Professional instructors accompanied all groups, providing safety oversight and marine biology education, while participants explored shallow reef systems from the surface perspective that only paddleboarding could provide. June 14th marked the fourth day of Sophie's reef exploration program, with conditions appearing ideal for their planned visit to a coral shelf system approximately 15 kilometers northeast of Port Douglas. The water temperature registered at 24 degrees Celsius, with virtually no surface wind and visibility extending beyond 30 meters in all directions. The tour group consisted of 8 participants, plus 2 certified instructors, each equipped with professional-grade paddleboards and emergency safety equipment. Marcus Fitzgerald, the lead instructor for Sophie's group, had been guiding paddleboard tours throughout the reef system for 7 years without experiencing any serious wildlife encounters. His extensive knowledge of local marine ecosystems and weather patterns had earned him recognition as one of the region's most qualified adventure sports guides. The secondary instructor, Jennifer Walsh, specialized in underwater photography and marine biology education, providing participants with detailed information about reef ecology during their expeditions. The group departed from Port Douglas Marina at 8:30 a.m. aboard a high-speed catamaran designed for adventure sports transportation. During the 45-minute journey to their destination, Walsh conducted educational presentations about reef conservation, marine life identification, and safety protocols for interacting with various species they might encounter during their paddleboarding activities. Upon reaching the designated coral shelf area, conditions appeared perfect for extended paddleboard exploration. The water depth varied between 2 and 8 meters, with extensive coral formations visible from the surface, providing excellent opportunities for photography and wildlife observation. Fitzgerald confirmed that current conditions posed minimal risk, with gentle tidal movements and no evidence of hazardous marine life activity. Sophie entered the water at 9:45 a.m., quickly finding her balance on the specialized reef paddleboard designed for stability in shallow water conditions. Her confidence level had increased significantly over the previous 3 days, and she felt comfortable navigating independently while maintaining visual contact with the instructor team. The morning session focused on exploring a particular section of reef known for its diverse fish populations and pristine coral formations. For the first 90 minutes, Sophie's paddleboard session proceeded without incident. She captured numerous photographs of tropical fish species, sea turtles, and coral formations while maintaining a proper distance from sensitive marine ecosystems. The combination of physical exercise and natural beauty created exactly the type of experience she had hoped to find during her Great Barrier Reef vacation. At 11:20 a.m., Sophie maneuvered her paddleboard over a deeper section of the coral shelf, where the bottom dropped to approximately 12 meters in depth. The increased water depth provided different viewing opportunities, with larger fish species and more dramatic coral formations visible in the crystal-clear water below her board. Suddenly, movement in her peripheral vision caught Sophie's attention. A large, streamlined form was approaching from the deeper water, moving with the distinctive swimming pattern that experienced water sports enthusiasts learned to recognize as potentially dangerous. The creature's size and coloration immediately identified it as a tiger shark, estimated at 12 feet in length, based on its proportions relative to the coral formations below. The tiger shark approached Sophie's paddleboard with obvious curiosity, circling at a distance of approximately 5 meters while studying this unusual surface disturbance. Tiger sharks are known for their investigative nature, often approaching unfamiliar objects to determine their potential as food sources or threats. Sophie remained motionless on her board, remembering safety instructions about avoiding sudden movements that might trigger aggressive behavior. Without warning, the shark accelerated directly toward her paddleboard, breaking the surface as it lunged upward with explosive force. Its powerful jaws clamped down on Sophie's right ankle, the razor-sharp teeth penetrating her wetsuit and skin instantly. The impact knocked her off the board and into the water, where she found herself face-to-face with one of the ocean's most efficient predators. Sophie's training in aquatic sports proved invaluable, as she fought against panic while the shark maintained its grip on her ankle. She used her free leg to kick at the predator's snout, a technique she had learned during shark safety courses while simultaneously attempting to grab her paddleboard for additional buoyancy and protection. Fitzgerald, positioned approximately 50 meters away on his kayak, immediately recognized the emergency situation when he observed Sophie's sudden entry into the water, accompanied by significant splashing and obvious signs of distress. He began paddling rapidly toward her location while shouting instructions and creating noise designed to distract the attacking shark. The tiger shark released Sophie's ankle after approximately 15 seconds, but continued circling her position while she treaded water and attempted to climb back onto her paddleboard. The predator seemed confused by her defensive actions, and the approaching instructor eventually deciding to retreat toward deeper water rather than continue its investigation. Fitzgerald reached Sophie within 2 minutes of the initial attack, immediately assessing her injuries while helping her maintain position on her paddleboard. The shark bites had caused deep lacerations across her ankle and lower leg, with significant bleeding that required immediate medical attention to prevent further complications. Emergency medical evacuation procedures were initiated immediately, with the tour boat returning to Port Douglas at maximum speed while crew members provided first aid treatment for Sophie's injuries. She remained conscious and responsive throughout the evacuation, though she experienced significant shock and pain from the attack. Sophie received comprehensive medical treatment, including surgical repair of the lacerations, antibiotic therapy to prevent infection, and trauma counseling to address the psychological effects of the attack. Her recovery required several weeks of rehabilitation, but she eventually regained full mobility in the affected limb. Marine biologists who investigated the incident confirmed that tiger shark activity in the reef area had increased during June 2025, possibly related to seasonal prey movements or territorial behavior. They emphasized that such attacks remain extremely rare, but recommended enhanced safety protocols for water sports activities in areas known to support tiger shark populations. The Atlantic waters off the coast of North Carolina had experienced an unusually active hurricane season by September 2023, with multiple tropical systems generating dangerous sea conditions throughout the late summer months. Commercial fishing vessels operating from ports along the Outer Banks faced increasingly challenging weather patterns, forcing captains to make difficult decisions about when conditions remained safe for offshore expeditions. The area's rich fishing grounds provided excellent opportunities for commercial catches, but also exposed crews to the full fury of Atlantic storm systems. Marcus Hale, a 38-year-old commercial fisherman from Wanchese, North Carolina, had been working these waters for 15 years as a crew member aboard various fishing vessels. His experience with Atlantic weather patterns and deep water fishing techniques made him a valuable crew member for captains seeking to maximize their catches while maintaining reasonable safety margins. The vessel he worked aboard, a 45-foot commercial fishing boat named Atlantic Bounty, maintained an excellent safety record under Captain Robert Manning's experienced leadership. On September 21st, Manning's crew included 4 additional fishermen besides Hale: Tommy Rodriguez, a veteran deckhand with 20 years' experience; Kevin O'Sullivan, the boat's engineer and navigation specialist; David Chen, a recent addition to the crew who had relocated from California seeking better fishing opportunities; and Jake Thompson, the youngest crew member at 24 years old, eager to prove himself in the demanding commercial fishing industry. Weather forecasts indicated marginal conditions for offshore fishing, with scattered thunderstorms expected to develop during the afternoon hours. However, recent catches had been disappointing due to previous storm activity, creating financial pressure to attempt fishing operations whenever conditions appeared remotely feasible. Manning decided to proceed with the expedition, planning to return to port immediately if weather conditions deteriorated beyond acceptable limits. The Atlantic Bounty departed from Wanchese Harbor at 5:30 a.m., reaching the offshore fishing grounds by 8:15 a.m., under partly cloudy skies with moderate wind conditions. Initial fishing activities proceeded successfully, with the crew deploying their standard complement of lines and nets to target the area's abundant populations of tuna, mahi-mahi, and other commercially valuable species. By 11 a.m., weather conditions began deteriorating rapidly as predicted thunderstorms developed earlier than forecast. Wind speeds increased from 15 knots to over 30 knots within 30 minutes, while wave heights grew from manageable 2-foot swells to dangerous 6-foot seas that made normal fishing operations increasingly hazardous. Manning ordered his crew to secure their catch and prepare for immediate departure toward port, but the storm system's rapid development had created conditions that made safe navigation extremely challenging. Waves continued building throughout the early afternoon, reaching 8 to 10 feet by 2 p.m. and creating situations where the vessel's 45-foot length provided minimal stability against the powerful Atlantic swells. At 2:30 p.m., while Rodriguez and Hale attempted to secure loose fishing equipment that had broken free during a particularly violent wave encounter, an enormous shadow appeared beneath the churning surface waters surrounding their vessel. The crew initially assumed they were observing debris or kelp displaced by the storm, but closer observation revealed the distinctive outline of a large shark circling their boat. Chen, who had been monitoring their position from the wheelhouse, estimated the shark's length at approximately 10 feet, based on its proportions relative to their vessel's dimensions. The predator's behavior seemed unusually focused on their boat, swimming in tight circles rather than passing through the area, as most sharks would during stormy conditions. Oceanic white-tip sharks are known for their bold, aggressive nature and tendency to investigate any disturbance in their environment, particularly during stormy weather when normal prey patterns become disrupted. This particular specimen appeared to be investigating the various scents and vibrations emanating from their fishing vessel, possibly attracted by blood from their morning catch or mechanical sounds from their struggling engine. The situation escalated dramatically when a massive wave struck the Atlantic Bounty from the starboard side, rolling the vessel nearly 30 degrees and throwing crew members across the deck. Hale, who had been attempting to untangle fishing lines near the stern rail, was thrown against the port side and nearly went overboard before catching himself on the safety rigging. As he struggled to regain his footing, the oceanic white-tip shark suddenly lunged from the churning water, its powerful jaws clamping down on Hale's left leg just below the knee. The shark's attack occurred so quickly that other crew members initially failed to understand what had happened, assuming Hale had simply lost his balance during the vessel's violent rolling motion. The shark's grip on Hale's leg created a horrifying tug-of-war situation, with the predator's powerful body weight threatening to drag him completely overboard, while his desperate grip on the safety rigging provided the only thing preventing him from disappearing into the stormy Atlantic. His screams of pain and terror alerted the rest of the crew to the true nature of the emergency they were facing. Rodriguez immediately grabbed a boat hook and began striking at the shark's head and snout, hoping to force it to release Hale's leg. Thompson joined the effort by throwing any available objects at the predator, including tackle boxes, life preservers, and pieces of loose equipment. The combination of impacts and loud noises seemed to confuse the shark, but it maintained its grip on Hale's leg with devastating effect. O'Sullivan attempted to maneuver the boat's position to provide better access for rescue efforts, but the storm conditions made precise navigation nearly impossible. The vessel's engine struggled against the heavy seas, and steering response remained sluggish due to the extreme wave action surrounding them. After what seemed like an eternity but probably lasted less than 3 minutes, the oceanic white-tip finally released Hale's leg and disappeared beneath the storm-tossed waters. The crew immediately pulled him aboard and assessed his injuries, which included severe lacerations, crush damage to his lower leg bones, and significant blood loss that required immediate medical attention. Manning radioed emergency services while his crew applied first aid and attempted to control Hale's bleeding using their vessel's limited medical supplies. The storm conditions prevented helicopter evacuation, forcing them to attempt the dangerous journey back to port while providing continuous medical care for their injured crew member. The Atlantic Bounty reached Wanchese Harbor at 6:45 p.m., where emergency medical personnel immediately transported Hale to a regional trauma center for comprehensive treatment. His injuries required multiple surgical procedures and extensive rehabilitation, but he eventually recovered sufficiently to return to modified fishing duties. Marine biologists who investigated the incident confirmed that oceanic white-tip sharks become increasingly aggressive during stormy weather, when disrupted prey patterns and increased environmental stress can trigger unusual behavior. They noted that commercial fishing vessels present multiple attractants for these predators, including fish blood, mechanical vibrations, and human activity that can stimulate investigative behavior. By April 2025, the coastal waters around Gansbaai, South Africa, had become a prime destination for extreme water sports, offering thrill seekers aerial views combined with close encounters with marine wildlife. The dramatic coastline, rocky outcroppings, and deep channels created ideal parasailing conditions, but also supported one of the world's largest great white shark populations. Local companies had developed specialized equipment and safety protocols to strike a balance between excitement and risk. Lucas Freeman, 31, from Sydney, Australia, had spent years chasing adrenaline worldwide. Rock climbing, base jumping, rafting, skiing. A professional adventure photographer by trade, Freeman had documented extreme sports across 6 continents, always seeking that perfect shot from death-defying angles. Parasailing over shark-infested waters promised a new challenge. Aerial flight paired with marine wildlife observation. Gansby's reputation drew him in. He booked with Coastal Extreme Adventures, which had logged over 12,000 flights in 8 years without a major wildlife incident. Captain Sarah van der Merwe led the crew, supported by equipment specialist Heinrich Botha, marine safety observer Michelle Stevens, and engineer Thomas Kruger. Their 35-foot vessel was equipped with specialized winch systems and emergency gear. On April 12th, conditions were ideal, with calm seas, moderate winds, and water temperatures of 18 degrees Celsius. Freeman's session was scheduled at 2 p.m., preceded by a briefing covering parasailing basics, emergency protocols, and the unique risks of shark activity. Van der Merwe emphasized that while attacks were rare, the ocean remained unpredictable, and Freeman signed additional waivers acknowledging the heightened risks of wildlife encounters. He wore a single-person harness, flotation gear, and a 12-foot parasail capable of keeping him 25 to 40 feet above the water at 15 to 20 knots. The launch at 2:15 p.m. went smoothly. Freeman rose to 30 feet and marveled at the coastline below. Kelp forests, reefs, schools of fish, and playful seals near the wake. At 2:38 p.m., Stevens spotted a disturbance 100 meters ahead. A 16-foot great white shark emerged, tracking the boat's path instead of passing through. Van der Merwe adjusted course, but the shark closed in. From above, Freeman was thrilled rather than afraid, believing altitude kept him safe. But a sudden wind shift caused his parasail to drop from 30 to under 15 feet. Despite the captain increasing speed, he sank lower until he hovered just 10 feet above the surface. The shark accelerated. In an instant, it breached and clamped onto Freeman's lower left leg with crushing force, pulling downward while his parasail held him aloft. The result was a surreal tug-of-war, man suspended between sky and predator. The crew reacted instantly. Botha operated the winch, Kruger readied medical gear, and Stevens blasted air horns. For 20 agonizing seconds, the shark thrashed, then lost its grip under its own weight and fell back into the sea. Freeman, bleeding heavily, was lifted aboard within minutes. His injuries, deep punctures, broken bones, massive tissue damage, required surgery and long rehabilitation, but the parasail had prevented him from being dragged underwater, saving his life. Freeman spent 6 weeks in Cape Town's trauma center undergoing multiple surgeries to repair severed tendons and reconstruct damaged muscle tissue. Despite facing permanent mobility limitations in his left leg, he refused to let the attack define him. He later reflected that the ocean had given him the ultimate adrenaline rush, and he could not hate it for being wild. The incident made international headlines, sparking debates about extreme tourism's boundaries. Freeman eventually returned to adventure photography, though he now works primarily from land-based locations. He maintains that his Gansby experience, while traumatic, represented the raw power of nature he'd always sought to capture. The attack triggered reviews of parasailing safety in shark-dense waters. Operators introduced stricter altitude minimums and enhanced weather monitoring to reduce risks in the future. Coastal Extreme Adventures implemented new protocols requiring immediate altitude increases whenever marine wildlife approached within 50 meters and invested in advanced shark detection sonar systems to better protect future thrill seekers.